Mm. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm Dr. Asha, the clinical head of LCCH LCCH Group, and it is truly a pleasure to welcome all of you today. As we know, with the increasing number of psychological distress globally, and practitioners are seeking for tools that truly make a difference. And I'm happy to share that EMDR continues to be recognized by WHO as one of the leading tool which has been used by our current practitioners. So today, you will receive a brief introduction to our EMDR program. And now it's my honor to invite our esteemed Director of Studies and also President of British Society of Clinical Hypnosis and Integrative Psychotherapy, Mr. Peter Mabbutt, to share more about the course. Over to you, Mr. Peter.
Lovely, thank you very much, and welcome everyone to this exploration. It's a brief exploration, but it's an exploration of what EMDR is, and also a little explanation as to how our course works with it, and also the opportunities you have as a practitioner to be able to integrate it into your existing therapy approach. And hopefully, towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So I'm very happy to answer any questions that people have about EMDR, about the course, and so on. We've got our course consultants here, Nasrat and Driska in with us, and they'll also be around to answer any questions you may have about the ins and outs of booking onto the course or the running of the course itself. We have been around for a very long time. The early 1980s when we first formed, and it's grown over the years. And over time, one of our ethoses that we've been building on is a commitment to inclusivity, but also a commitment to collaboration. And the reason I'm telling you this is because a lot of our collaborations that we've built based on the fact that we have people who we've trained who practice EMDR, who are able to go in and to work with some of these collaborations and the clients that they're seeing. Now, within that, what we're also finding is it's spreading the word of what EMDR is. We've got many different professional societies that we work with. We've got various institutions around the world, a whole host of businesses that we've been involved with using EMDR, using clinical hypnotherapy, using all the other psychotherapies that we train our students in. What we're having here is basically, we've got this technique called EMDR. We've got something that is known out in the world and getting more and more well known out in the world, and we've got people like the ones you see in front of you, and there are many more who are actively promoting the concept of EMDR to people that they are involved with, either from a corporate perspective, and yes, it has corporate uses with regards to breaking down resistance to collaborate and to interact at work, building up a sense of motivation and so on, but also very importantly within the healthcare professions, where we see elements of strong examples of trauma and beyond. EMDR is a very, very versatile and adaptable technique that can be used in many, many different situations. EMDR, what is it? In the 1970s, 1980s, when it was first evolved, it first came about. I've heard it from several different sources, including the founder, Francine Shapiro. Francine was a medical doctor working with traumatized war veterans, Vietnam War veterans, and she was researching, she was also treating these people who had PTSD using standard approaches, psychotherapy approaches. One day she was having a lunch break, wandering around in the campus park, and as she was walking under the trees, sunlight was coming down, and she was walking through, and she noticed her eyes were moving left and right in response to the flickering of the sun under the trees. And she also recognized that as she was doing this, she seemed to be processing out the answer she was looking for from the problem she was thinking about. She then went back to the lab and evolved this thing called EMDR. There were a couple of variations on it before she got to EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So she was able to look at that. She was able to then look at how it worked with the veterans, the war veterans, the traumatized veterans that were under her care, and it turned out to be an amazing way to work with trauma. In fact, the World Health Organization does put it forward as one of the recommended first-line defenses against trauma. With regard to that, she evolved this thing called EMDR. It then became known and it became spread throughout the world of psychotherapy. It works. And it works really, really well. I first trained in EMDR back in the late 1990s, built up the course that we are teaching today, along with my colleague Bill Frost. And we've been using it ever since, teaching it ever since. And I see almost on a daily basis with my client base how effective it can be. And it is. I'll give you a couple of examples of clients that I've worked with, and I do have permission to share this. I had a client who essentially her sister had been burnt badly in an accident. And when she was young, she felt it was her fault, even though her parents and family had said, no, it's nothing to do with you. You were on the other side of the room when this hot kettle got knocked over and the sister was burnt. She felt it was her fault. And so over a period of time, we started working on EMDR, using EMDR, helping her to go through and break down the blockage as to what really happened. It had happened. She'd taken the blame. She had very little memory of what it was, that the actual ins and outs of the event. Got through to that part, but then it took things a little deeper. In fact, an awful lot deeper. With the processing, EMDR unlocks, opens up memory networks that trauma blocks off. And it went back to a significant person in her life, her father, who essentially had had an issue with her when she was much younger. Not anything nasty. It was just a bit of a dismissive attitude towards her and so on, which for a young person can be obviously very, very traumatizing, upsetting, can interfere with the attachment bonding that they have, and so on. We had the incident with her sister, which was thought of to be, that's the big thing. In fact, it was only part of the original incident, which was the bonding and attachment to her father and, by extension, her mother. EMDR allowed us to get there and process it. I work a lot with trauma, and I had a young man who came to see me. He felt he thought he'd been sexually abused. He had a memory of sexual abuse, and he had a memory of being able to of what actually happened. He thought he remembered a car. He remembered being forced to bend over a car which was in a disused tunnel, and he was sexually abused in the tunnel. And we did a lot of good work. We were using EMDR in the child work, all sorts of things. But the EMDR was very instrumental in helping him to unlock things that had been really locked away. And we were a year and a half into trauma treatment with him, nearly 2 years, I think it was. And we're doing EMDR processing, and then all of a sudden he basically primal screamed. Suddenly this seething massive emotion came out, and basically he disclosed to me that it wasn't just one person, it was a serial rape gang that he was being used by, and that it wasn't just this gang that had abused him. There was a family member who came to stay and abused him and his brother, forcing them to do things together that were very, very traumatizing for him. And then it all shut down. He went off, week later, asked if he could see me again, had the session. He basically then said to me, between that last session and this session, and he said, I know not much happened on the last session. This session, he gave me somewhere between then, I've had some insight, and I think I know what went on. I'm saying, yes, what would that be? And he said, I think it wasn't just one person. I think it was a whole group of people. And then I remembered that I had my family member, my cousin, come and stay with us, and then he just talked to me about everything that had happened there. And I had and I have good rapport with him, and I just had a smile on my face, and he knew that smile, and he said to me, "You've got that smile on my face. You know this, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah. Last time we spoke, last time we saw each other," and then I said, "You disclosed all of that to me as part of the EMDR session." He said, "I have no memory of that," and that was. Talked to him about the way the mind protects, and then allowed him to get that information. But with both of these clients, EMDR really helped break through and get to the root of what it was that was driving. They were the big turning points for them, helped them to move on. Many other people like that. With regard to all of that, I mean, when you think about the people you're working with, is there anyone that you might feel stuck on that perhaps you might think EMDR could help with?
Thank you. It's actually somebody I've started been working with for about 3 years. There's a lot of childhood trauma. And we had one session of EMDR, and she suddenly said to me, I realized that I was naming feelings, but actually now I'm feeling feelings. She's neurodivergent as well, so there's an added element to this. But after 3 years of work, one session of EMDR using the little vibrator pod things, whatever they call them, she said, I actually realized that I've been naming the feelings, but I've not been feeling them. So it's early stages of using EMDR with her, but it seems to have unlocked something.
It's quite amazing. Well, we'll talk in a moment about the adaptive information processing model within EMDR, and how trauma gets blocked off into little separate packets, and through that locked off elements, she can name, but she's not actually attached to the feelings. And neurodivergent or not, that's a very common experience. I work with people who know they're in love with somebody, but because of the trauma, shut the feeling off. I know I'm in love, but I can't feel in love. So, and that's where EMDR works amazingly. It opens up memory networks that have been blocked, these connections. When we think of something now, if I'm thinking about my dog, she's just come in, I have memories of her, I have feelings of her, and they're all connected. So I can think about her, feel good about her, have a little laugh about her. In trauma, the mind shatters, the mind fractures, and the deeper the trauma, or the more frequent you bring in the complex PTSD, the complex traumas, the mind shatters more and more. So you have access to elements of that memory, picture, name, feeling, but no picture attached to the feeling. They're all separate. EMDR brings them together. That then allows the person to naturally process with regard to that. And that kind of gives me the opportunity to sort of move on to our next slide, because within this, we have, people often say, how does EMDR work? It works through stimulating our natural ability to process upset. And you have a massive blazing argument, you might dissociate, step back away from that, push the feelings, push the thoughts away. Over time, you start to ruminate and go out for coffee with your workmates and start moaning about the boss. You start having dreams about them. You start feeling angry, and you talk yourself through the anger. By the end of a week or so, it's integrated. The event happened, but you don't have the same anger in place. With is the natural information processing system that we have. What EMDR does, we think, and again, it's a model. So it's a model, it's our concept of understanding. So the adaptive information processing model allows the client to unblock whatever it is that's blocking the full integration of a memory. So trauma happens, emotions are split off, beliefs are split off, painful perceptions, perceived meanings, and also pain itself, somatic feelings, can be pushed away by all of this. And EMDR uses what are known as bilateral stimulation. The name EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is just a little bit wrong, because it implies we only use eyes, and as Joe was saying, you have the little buzzy thingies. We can use tactile stimuli, we can use sound, and so on. So what we think with the bilateral stimulation, so the eye movements or sounds or taps, buzzy thingies, technology comes into play. Something called the butterfly hug, which I will talk about later, which is a lovely way of tactile stimulation. They seem to, through various ways, open up the processing of the mind. What it will do is it'll target the neurological elements that are there within trauma, the somatic elements. It's one of the only therapies I know that really deals with the mind and the body and the belief structures and belief systems and so on, all in one small package. So it targets all of these, and through doing that, through breaking down blockages, it opens up the process of integration and resolution. And in so doing, we get the beliefs. We work with unhealthy beliefs and put in healthy beliefs. We work with the affect, the emotion, brings that down. We work with body feelings, as I say. I've got to remember that somatization often comes out. You can have somebody, and I work with several people with psychosomatic pain, been diagnosed by a doctor, psychosomatic pain, process EMDR, and it takes you through to a traumatic experience, a trauma. Trauma's in the mind going, hello, recognize me, I want to be processed. And the client is not listening, pushing it away, defense mechanisms. And it's pushing hard. And that's where it says, right, you're not listening to me, I'm going to make you feel pain, or I'm going to make you experience this. This is when FND and things like that can come about, functional neurological disorder or conversion disorders. And so through that bilateral stimulation, it helps us to connect, it helps us to process all of these elements of a trauma. And at a neurological level, when you look at the brain and you look at the scans, it balances out the two sides of the brain. So the two sides, the so-called logical left and creative right, which again, it's coming back round to showing there's some truth within that. They're working on at their most optimally balanced way. And those of you, then you hear on here with them also interested in more of the neurology, what it's doing is this thing called the amygdala, which is part of our fear and fright system, calms that part of the brain down. It helps the hippocampus, which is part of our system in the brain that deals with memory. It helps that to then build better communication with the memories, and at the same time goes on to the prefrontal cortex to stimulate a clarity and a balance in thinking. So these various areas of the brain, instead of sort of going, no, I'm not listening to you, they're talking. And it processes everything out. So that's where people get that clarity from with EMDR, and why it works so effectively. Why EMDR? It's such a really good, brilliant therapy. Don't get me wrong, there are loads of really good, brilliant therapies out there, but this has just that added extra something else to it, where people have been stuck, people have got blocked memory processes, blocked processing processes, it allows the client to really get to the core of what they are wanting to, what they're coming for treatment for. And even with the most complex of cases, trauma-based cases, it works spectacularly well. So you've got a whole element of being able to not just tackle a symptom, but for the right client, tackle the source of that symptom. And sometimes the source of that symptom is something quite surprising. I had a client who was basically she had an absolute horrendous fear of being on the London tube system. Quite a lot of people do have a fear of being there, but she had the most horrendous. She could hardly shut across the road to try and avoid tube stations. I used EMDR with her as part of the treatment I was doing. Essentially, the blockages got opened up. She had no idea why she didn't like tubes to that extent. It had just grown over the years, no idea why. And we did EMDR, and she kept going back to a memory of her with her niece and family in the countryside having a picnic. And it was a lovely memory, happy memory. And we spent quite a long time, a lot of sessions going back, and kept going back to that. The processing was always going back to that memory. And it was a happy memory. It was a good memory. And I think about the fifth session, and we were back at the memory, and I was processing it through with her, and she just suddenly stopped and opened her eyes and went, "Oh my gosh." And I calmly said, "Would you like to share with me what you're experiencing?" She said, "I know where it's come from. I've just remembered. When I was a little girl, I used to watch a TV program, and in the TV program, there was this little girl and her family out having a picnic in the countryside, and she was off playing. The little girl was off playing, and it started raining, and she saw, it was an American show, she saw a storm drain, so she went into the storm drain to shelter, and she crawled a little way up. She was exploring it in the TV program, and she got stuck, and she was wedged in, and the rain was falling outside, storm drain was filling up, and she said the program ended just as the water was getting to her mouth. And she said, "That's where my upset comes from." And I looked at her and she said, and I asked, "Would you like to share a little bit more about that?" And she said, "Yes, when I'm on a tube," I don't know if people have not visited London and been on the tube. It literally is a tube, most of it. You're in a little tin can that's going along on rails, and there's virtually no gap between the train and the wall. And she said, "It's that gap. There's no gap. That's what reminds me of this TV program." And that's the source. Once we got to that, within 2 weeks, I had her sitting on the circle line as a part of her homework, going round and round and round, reading a book, happy as anything. But it was EMDR that got her to that point. It took her back to the happy memory. And this is the one thing when we're processing, we've got to remember, sometimes the happy memory, it's lovely to have, but it might be informative as to something else. And for her, that real happy memory of her with her family then clicked in to her memory of when she was much younger watching that TV program. It's useful through many, many places, many ways that we work with them. Work with anything that's building with anxiety, anything that's building with a lack of self-worth, people who aren't able to control emotion, people who aren't able to feel emotion, and so we look at those elements there. And as I say, we're looking at source, we deal with symptoms, but we're also looking at the source, finding out where it comes from if we need to. We do a lot of our collaborations with addiction centres. We have people coming from them now to train in EMDR, because when we're working with addictions, people who have serious addictions, the addiction stems from somewhere. Yes, of course, it can be recreational, it's just got out of hand. But in a lot of cases, the addiction is there as an attempt to deal with the negative emotions and the negative memories that come up. So within addiction centres, and certainly the ones we're working with, and our graduates get the opportunity to work with these within these addiction centres and online, because we spread across the world. But what they're looking at there is, yes, they're dealing with the addiction, but also dealing with the source. What is the addiction trying to, what is the drug, what is the sexual behavior, whatever it is they're addicted to, trying to suppress or repress, to push away. Deal with that. There's no need to numb yourself down to escape. And so we're finding it very, very impressive there. Nowadays, I mean, EMDR is getting good press out there. There are a lot of people out there talking about EMDR, a lot of people out there who are hearing about it. And even within, I know I was watching a film on Netflix the other day, and guess what? There was somebody there doing EMDR on it. And okay, it was a bit stylized and not really what EMDR was like, but it was, the name was out there and it was being very positively promoted. Clients are coming to us now looking for EMDR. They understand it as a valid option. Clients are informed about their traumas, and they know things like EMDR exists. And as therapists, we might have one modality of therapy that we use, and that can be a really, really good way of treating trauma. I mean, my prime modality is clinical hypnotherapy. Absolutely passionate about it. But when I discovered EMDR, I brought that in and I integrated it into my approach to treating clients. And so in so doing, I then found I had an integrative approach to work with clients that was really effective, where hypnotherapy couldn't go, or might have been dangerous to go. EMDR was there, and quite rapid and quite effective within that modality, within that concept. So it's not just a coping strategy, it is something that can dig deeper and dig out, if the client is obviously consenting, dig out the core and heal, in inverted commas, whatever heal means, but heal that core there. So it's a therapy in its own right, of course it is, but I think even most EMDR therapists wouldn't recommend you just use it in its own right. It certainly integrates into a process of therapy, irrespective of your initial, your prime discipline. So, we have fairly standard way we conceptualize treatment, stabilization, change, and then the maintenance of the change. So when I'm working with a client, and the way we teach is that you stabilize, in other words, ensure the client has the emotional and cognitive resources to cope with the process of change. Do some work from your prime discipline to ensure the client is ready, and then move into EMDR. So EMDR, processing out what needs processing. Then from that point, you then move back to your other discipline or disciplines to do any other elements of change that might be required, and then move into the maintenance. So, setting themselves up for the future, the near future and the distant future, that ensures that change is there until you finally get to the discharge. Now, sort of this maintenance or this change, EMDR, more change, maintenance, sometimes it's a bit cyclical. You go round and round and round there. Sometimes you get to the EMDR and something opens up and you have to go back to stabilization. It's just the nature of therapy. But it is such a powerful approach to use and to bring in. And there are many, many different protocols that are out there. There's protocols, not just one, there's protocol for long-standing trauma, protocol for recent trauma, protocols for ongoing trauma, protocols that take into account complex post-traumatic stress disorder, protocols for smoking cessation, weight management, pain management, protocols for working with eating disorders, protocols for working with panic disorders. From its initial creation of working with PTSD, it's really branched out. And there are even protocols, those of you who work within positive psychology or hypnotherapists who are used to the use of ego strengthening, ego boosting techniques, space for well-being. There's even a protocol, the RDI, Resource Development Installation Protocol, that is superb at helping people not touch on any trauma, but to feel better, and ways of helping people to maintain the change. So there are many different approaches out there, irrespective of your background. CBT, psychodynamic approaches, counseling background, whatever. It can and does integrate into that. So, probably have guessed we are very heavily into the idea of integrative psychotherapy now. And EMDR is a wonderful tool that fits in with an integrative approach. You don't have to just sit there and think, oh, I'm stuck, don't know what to do hypnotically. Well, there might be indications for EMDR to come in. Or if you do something like ego state therapy, where parts work, but not just parts work deluxe. It really is an in-depth therapy. They're now linking ego state therapy and EMDR together. In EMDR, we target basically the most disturbing part of an incident. We call that the node, or the target. And now there is, the EMDR people and ego state people are agreeing that the node is an ego state. So the two are really connecting together very nicely. But it is such, working with CBT, working with somebody challenging a belief. The belief just is resisting being challenged. Work with it in EMDR. Can work with the blockage that's preventing the challenging of the belief itself. Good for short and long-term work. It's good for so many different approaches, and I love it. I fell in love with it the moment I first started training in the 90s, with it at the end of the 90s, because I see so many clients come out the other side of the processing and their lives have changed, really changed. One client who had the sister who's burnt, she's now got a very busy practice. She's a complementary alternative therapist, very busy practice. My other client who has discovered he was abused by several people, travelled around the world, and is now back, and he's producing films, one of which will be his story. So, but that neither of them would have ever got there without EMDR. I really believe that. Yes, we train in EMDR. We also we have a whole advanced practitioner diploma in integrative psychotherapy. EMDR, our course, is a course in its own right. Just make sure you understand that. You can do EMDR and that's all you need to do. But we believe in integrative psychotherapy, so we have our active course. With our advanced practitioner diploma in integrative psychotherapy, and we've got the EMDR course, we've got our ego state therapy course, and we have a course on integrative psychotherapy, what that means, the cultural aspects, the other elements that are coming in, how it links in with lifestyle approaches, and integrative medicine, and so on. So those three courses are open to basically anyone who's a qualified psychotherapist of some description can come onto those. We require 4 out of the 5 of our courses to be taken to go forward for the APTIC course. So you've got a choice of CBT. We teach CBT from the REBT perspective, which is open to all psychotherapists, or the ABPP course, Addictive Behaviours and Psychological Pain, which is an advanced hypnotherapy course where we look at addictive behaviours and psychological pain with that course. But they're all held within a context of trauma work on standard approaches, because EMDR, I use it for smoking cessation, I use it for pain management, all sorts of things, but also the deeper trauma work. Through EMDR, I got into absolute passion for working with trauma. Each one of those courses is a course in its own right. You can look at it, do it, and benefit from it, take it out and work with your clients. But we've designed them so that they do link together for those who are doing the work through that. So our EMDR course itself, let's look at just a bit of an overview there. It's essentially what we have is a 4-month delivery. It takes place over 4 months. We have live virtual lectures because we are based around around the world. But the beautiful thing about having live virtual and having people from different countries coming in is it's bringing in the cultural diversity of therapy. There are movements within a lot of psychotherapies that are really looking at the cultural differences, the cultural similarities, how culture plays an important part of going through therapy. So we bring that element in. We're very practical based. Just let you know that we're extremely practical based. There are collaborative discussions, so we sit down and we have groups where we discuss and work through different things. We also have small group tutorials within it where you see a tutor and you basically get the opportunity to discuss around the subject that you're discussing in that tutorial with EMDR. And also, every one of our lecturers are really experienced with EMDR. So our next intake, as it says there, is January 2026, and that's where Naz and Riska will come in. I've got more about that very shortly. What we do with this course and all our advanced courses, we take whatever your discipline is and we help you to build up on it, as opposed to say, right, forget everything else, you have to start here. No, remember everything you've got, whatever your discipline is. We'll explore with you how EMDR fits in, and even if you're not a person of a particular discipline, you learn from that sharing experience. Basically, with our course, if you register with the course, a couple of benefits you're going to be looking at. You've got a free 6-month membership for the International Alliance of Clinical Hypnotherapy and Integrative Psychotherapy. With regard to that, you've got access to the IACHIP, the International Alliance of Clinical Hypnotherapy and Integrative Psychotherapy Forum. So what that's about is a professional body. It's overseeing practice and so on of all the psychotherapists, including EMDR. So you've got that element there. You've got the chance to talk to each other, work with each other. If you're into QR codes and things like that, they're their contact details. Now I've got a couple of questions come through. Okay, the first one from Tracy is, sorry, I can't speak, but would like to ask, for clients with trauma, does the EMDR trigger their inner fears if all the memories get triggered or returned back? It doesn't. It safely connects them with those inner fears. It doesn't trigger them. We have very strict safety protocols with regards to that. So yes, it will connect with them. You have to connect with them in order to process them, but it doesn't trigger them. It's a very different thing. They're not necessarily going to go into full breakdown mode with it. The majority of trauma processing, my client who suddenly remembered all of the sexual abuse he'd had, that was an exception, not the rule. Most of my clients process they get insight, they get connection to the emotion, the belief that's holding the emotion in place, the images that's holding him in place, and it just waters them down. What I mean is it's kind of like washing it away in a healthy, healing way with regard to that. So no, it's controlled. We have protocols in place, very much in place in order to ensure safety. We create a safe space. We can guide the clients in there. We have approaches within EMDR that helps calm them and so on. With regard to that, and Natasha says, what regulatory boards can you sign up with? Oh, welcome to the world of the politics that's out there. People like the BSCHIP and AICHIP, the NCIP, you can join those people. There is a huge issue with people like EMDRIA, and I can't not mention it. They're very closed shop as to who they will allow to come in. If you've not been trained by their particular trainers, you can't join, not allowed in. There are people we are in conversation with them, very good conversation, who are from that area of the world, who I'm trying to be so careful here, that are setting out, they're recognizing people like us, and there are loads of people out there recognizing what we do, and people who train like we do, and realizing the validity of the robust nature of the training. We follow Shapira's protocol completely, and the newer elements that come in. So a specific EMDR board out there, sometimes you can, we're hearing people are being accepted into EMDR IA, might be case by case basis. We're working with another organization, a global organization, to be able to help with connecting with someone like that. But the integrative psychotherapy organizations, they are very much supportive of what we do. And, we train people and they're practicing in hospitals. We train people, addiction clinics. We train people working within all stratas of healthcare and private practice. And people who have done our training can get insurance for it, not just in one area of the world, in a number of, well, just about every area of the world. I don't think we've got anyone who can't. Bearing in mind, in certain countries like America, they've got strict laws as to who can practice. Non-jurisdictional countries, like most of the rest of the world, it's as long as you've got insurance, you're fine with that. And the insurance companies don't insure you just by saying, "Oh, I read a book." You actually have to have done a training in it that they will recognise. So yes, you can get insurance via this, or add EMDR to your existing insurance schedule. So thank you, everyone. And if you want to go get passionate about EMDR, it is an amazing, amazing thing.